Next topic is going to be the generative AI applications to 3D graphics and spatial computing and just the world of 3D in general, which I think is super, super interesting. And we've got 4 people on this panel that are experts in this and have endless things to say about it. And we're going to spend the next 35 minutes doing that. So I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves first. So Marguerite, go ahead.
Thanks, John. Marguerite, CEO of Blockade Labs. We use text prompts to assist users in the ideation and iteration phase of world building. So we first create these 360 6K resolution images that you can then iterate on, and then from there continue down your world building purpose. And so what we're excited to talk about today is how can you take a 2D 360 image and then also end up with 3D assets that live within inside that world.
Okay, John.
Hey, I'm John. I've been interested in 3D for a long time. I think it was like the mid-90s. I was a teenager. I built my first 3D engine around the year 2000, programmed first neural network, did research in AI models of human visual imagination 15 years ago. So very excited about this space. And now I have a company, Masterpiece Studio. We have a product called Masterpiece X. It allows you to go from a text prompt all the way to a complete 3D asset that can be used in a virtual environment. So that's the mesh, texture, rig, animation, everything all from a prompt. And that's out today. You can use it at masterpiecex.com. But what's even more exciting for the people in this room potentially is the APIs. So anyone here can transform their platform into a 3D AI simply by connecting with our APIs.
Cool. Tejas.
Hi, I'm Tejas, CEO of Common Sense Machines. Common Sense Machines basically build the first 3D foundation model. Our goal is to create a superhuman 3D artist. So the idea is basically right now, if you want to create AAA quality 3D assets, it can be thousands of dollars, but it's a problem that AI can solve actually. So if you go on csm.ai, you'll see some of the best models are already deployed, and the goal is to get to superhuman level. So anyone here in this room can create 3D content.
Nima.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nima. I'm the director of product at Leia. We're the world's leading stereoscopic 3D company. We have more hardware, software, and AI than anyone else in the stereoscopic 3D space specifically. You may know us for our app LeiaPix. The LeiaPix converter is a web app you can use to convert and create animations. It's one of the most popular AI apps out there. People use it with Midjourney, DALL-E, etc. And it has millions of users. We're really jazzed about that. AI is not our primary focus, but I think that what we're seeing all these incredible people do, we think our tech can help supercharge that. And we think that AI is a core part of how the future is going to be, future of media is going to be built.
Awesome. So what I'd like to do is kind of dive right into the problems of 3D, how hard it is, but also like how close are we to this technology? So Tejas, you explained that you're actually building foundation models. So like you're at kind of that base layer of what makes this kind of technology feasible. I guess the twin part question is like, what's hard about this, and is it actually something that we're close to solving in the same way that like conversational AI seems magical now, 2D art seems magical? How close is the magic?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you look at like text actually ended up being an easier problem. That's why LLMs exist. Then the next harder problem was images, and that came after that, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney. So we don't yet have a 3D GPT, and I think there are some deep fundamental reasons for this. I think there are 2 main reasons. One is that if you try to buy all of the 3D content, let's say on like Shutterstock or something like that, you'll probably get like sub-million 3D assets. If you try to buy images, you'll get like hundreds of millions, right? So one of the main problems is that 3D doesn't have a lot of data, so you have to do unsupervised learning. GPT solved that by doing next token prediction. That's why these models work really well. I think only now we are beginning to see architectures that actually do a similar way of token prediction, but not in the same tokens that LLMs exist. But so I would give it basically end of next year, where we would see a Midjourney level result in 3D, where any the AAA artist would look at that and say, okay, this is not a gimmick anymore.
What do the other folks on our panel think of the closeness of 3D?
I think it depends on the quality that you want. I mean, today we can already produce content that can be used in virtual environments. And if you're taking for consumer grade or prosumer or people that don't need to deeply critique that one of the textures has, you know, a little issue on the side or something like that. That's already today. Now, then there's going to be a rollout, right? What's going to be good enough for indies maybe late this year, early next year. Kind of that AA, you know, sometime next year. AAA, you know, maybe late next year, early the year after that. So what the key thing is also depends on what you're trying to achieve with it. So if it's kind of anything pre-production, all of those can happen today. You know, if it's the top high-end production, you know, then you're looking 1 or 2 years out. And that also even depends, is that the primary character or some object in the background? So these are all kind of considerations, not that one answer fits all, but make no mistake about it. Within the next couple of years, this is an extinction event for how 3D content is made.
I just want to add that one of the things that I think is really important is the compute and the amount of compute it takes to make these 3D assets and the speed in which people want to iterate. So I think we're going to see the convergence of how we create the content where you can go from, I think Emmanuel was talking about this scenario on an earlier panel, was the ideation of the 2D and then being able to have this creative flow and iteration process to get to the 3D asset without having all the waste like we have today when you have your various teams working on concept and what is this world going to be, what's going to live inside that world, and then also then you go to 3D modeling, but they're two separate types of art and teams, and then does this work inside your game engine and the rest of the physics? You know, I think that these things are going to be more intertwined in how we go from production with your art director all the way through with your whole team to the end result and being playable and usable at its final state.
Anyone else want to add?
I've tried quite a few of the tools, and I think that as of today, it's perfectly fine if you need some gray box like scratch work to build something at a hackathon and you're not super particular about what the content is. But I think that the most important thing is letting people get the ability to tweak the output that they want to match it to the quality that they're getting in other current generative 2D AI images. And I think once that happens, it'll totally revolutionize the iteration time of building games and other interactive experiences. But as of right now, I don't think we're even at that level yet. So I'm excited to see the future.
But if I was going to make a betting market on this, basically, it sounds like the range is 6 months to 2 years kind of time horizon for like AAA quality. And for those who don't come from the game industry, AAA basically just means your huge budget games. They're usually $100 million plus budget games that take normally 5-7 years to create, which that's a really long time and a lot of capital for something where you have to imagine what the world looks like in 5 or 7 years out, which I don't actually have. I don't think anybody has the ability to do that, so it's kind of hard. So let's maybe focus in the camera lens though to like what's happening now. Marguerite, the thing that's interesting about what you're doing is you're not waiting for these things to come along. Like you have this technology called skyboxes. Maybe explain for people what skyboxes are and how people are using them. How do you expect people are going to continue to build worlds within this?
Sure. So if you're a game developer, you probably know that in a 3D engine, you use a skybox, which is a 360 image to help with your set and setting of your space. And so what we decided when we were looking at the market and the opportunity, we had this ability to generate very high resolution images very quickly. And so one of the highest selling asset packs are something known as skyboxes, which are these 360 images. However, they're very generic because they're a pain in the butt for artists to make. So artists really don't like making them. So actually for us, we haven't really had any kickback on artists being like, hey, you're interrupting our space. They're like, sweet, now we can have like more leverage in the types of images we were trying to make in the first place. So anyways, with this process, something we realized was Today, most people have to start with somewhat of a blank canvas when they're going into their 3D environments and trying to imagine how these assets all fit together. If you can use something like a 360 immersive image generator, which puts you into the world quicker and allows you to iterate what you like and don't like, to do very much a yes and conversation with the generative AI to get you to like, that's the look, that's the scene, that's my immersive narrative, and now I can start building out the rest of it around that context, and also use the AI for it to have the context to derive additional assets or objects from layer segmentation of that starting scene. So we start really lightweight, and then we add, so we actually generate depth with your initial image. We do something pretty unique. We worked with some Intel researchers, so you have your depth computation with the image, which allows you then to move into mesh. So like, I think that Jonathan and I probably have a lot of overlap and synergies in this type of work we do and where we can push the technology, but first it's lightweight iteration, then it's actual use case and utility for production.
One of the things I heard you say was, there's an aspect of making skyboxes that people don't actually enjoy all that much. That's something that I think people that don't work every day in 3D may or may not realize. Like, there are certainly parts that people really love in the craftsmanship of making 3D objects and 3D universes and stuff. But there's also some elements that aren't that much fun. Like, the classic one in my mind is like figuring out the whole UV unwrap for a model, which I see people laughing. If you don't know what 3D I'll invite maybe John to like add to that. Like, are there parts people don't like in 3D graphics?
Absolutely. So here's what artists love. They love to create, and they love to take their idea and to bring that in their creative vision into reality. That's what artists love. What artists don't love is doing nuanced technical things that they are forced to do, like UV unwrapping, which is if you have a 3D object like me and you have to wrap it, find a creative way to unwrap it so it fits on a flat square, that's not fun, that's not creative. Other thing is rigging too, where you have to put the skeleton inside the the character that you want, and you have to paint all of the polygons, well really the vertices on them, so that they match up with those bones so it bends all right. I have friends that work at Pixar, and you know what they say? To get a job as a rigger at Pixar, you just have to like rigging, because so few people like rigging that if you do, you'll get good enough to work at Pixar. There's a lot more, but it illustrates John's point. There's parts in the process that creatives shouldn't be doing or shouldn't have to do, so let's remove those barriers and let them be creatives.
In fact, when a lot of people get hired for a game studio, for example, they get hired to be an animator, and then they find out that their job is rigging. And usually that's not the surprise that they were looking for. So there's opportunities to really accelerate the whole pipeline. Does anyone else have any thoughts on just sort of like we're kind of getting to the here and now and the problems that people really would love to be automated in a way?
I think one population that I'm excited about the most is like, I was able to do things in 3D that I wasn't. And I think, that's the real promise, because it's all about like giving, it's about expanding the number of people that can create a content, like a new media content. Almost like if I were to ask in this room, when was the last time you created anything in 3D? Raise your hand. Yeah, I mean, it's almost no one, right? But everyone is writing text, everyone is clicking pictures. So all of these things like Metaverse and all these things haven't taken off because it's just impossible to create anything that is engaging. So I think the real kind of thing that we can do today, and I think we have a massive user base of people that are essentially creators. I mean, and they are able to create all these things now, and they weren't able to before. So I think that's something that has already started. We don't have to wait for the big studios or AA studios even. There's an entire army of people that are essentially just ready to adopt new tools, and they just want new technologies to be pushed to them in an easy interface. So I think that is today, and tomorrow it will be the professionals.
So that's an interesting way to also think of the impact of this kind of technology. So one aspect of it, of course, is just like accelerating production processes, and a traditional game studio can now maybe put out the output of a AAA studio, but with far, far fewer people. That is an important implication of it. But you were just kind of touching on that it also changes who creates, who even could be a game developer. John, when we were talking before this panel, one of the things you mentioned to me is like, what happens in a world where like 1 billion people can create like this? Like, what do you think? How has the world changed?
That's a game changer. Our mission is to enable 1 billion people to create in 3D. Now, some people are like, well, who creates? Like, most people aren't creators. You know, they give these stats on like the percentage of people who watch videos on YouTube versus making it. Which one's easier, watching a video or spending a week making a video? That's the discrepancy. It's not about whether or not people consume or create. It's about which one's harder. You know, in fact, is every single person in this room is a creator. Even in terms of having a conversations, you know, you speak and you listen. What is the often advice people have for people in communication is to listen more, consume more, because reality is talking is often easier than listening. So the point there is that everybody does likes to do what's easy. And if you look at in terms of even creation and creativity, you know, people are shocked at how much of the population does that today. 30% of the people in the economy are in the creator class. I heard one stat from 41% in 2016 identified as a creative in general, considers themselves creative. So people are doing this. Now, everybody here is a creator in terms of writing. What does it mean when you just write something and it creates? When people say an image is worth 1,000 words, but what about creating entire scenes, entire environments? You can write what you say and you can communicate better. So what does that look like when there's 1 billion people? Well, that's a game changer, because now you sort of enter a new era of communication. You can now visually communicate with each other. That changes the game for game creation, but that changes the game for entertainment, for creating marketing material, for engaging with your colleagues, to helping people train. All of this, and people won't be like, well, 3D, I don't do 3D. It's like, well, no, I mean, you're exposed to it all day. Most people don't realize that. They're looking at 3D objects constantly throughout the day. So I think that this is a critical thing when 3D objects are like 2D images, but can do a lot more and superior in every way. When you give that superpower to everyone to wrap that up, that enables all of us to be able to communicate, interact, and play much easier.
Marguerite, I've heard you say similar things. You talk about people co-creating in 3D spaces.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to add to some of these numbers here, so on Roblox, for example, there's 66 million daily active users, and about 2% of those are creators. How many of you guys have actually used Roblox, like in this room? Anybody used it? You'll know it's like actually pretty terrible. Have you it's like so clunky.
You like Lua?
And so, like, if you think like, okay, you have a hardcore user base here of 2 million-ish people that are going to be daily creators. Now, think about these tools and how we are democratizing creativity, lowering the barrier, throwing away this like terrible UI, and allowing you to get an idea that's in your mind out on paper or on computer as fast as possible. Like, that really lowers the barrier to entry. And how many people would use a creative flow like this for so many things? Ideas that you might be a weekend warrior that, you know, works at a AAA game company but can be a solo developer now and test out so many different ideas and get to the fun and weird of something faster, and then also be able to open up and have an ecosystem of co-creators who can leverage your canon game design, development, art style, and build outside fan material that can all feed this ecosystem, and then it be more of a collaborative experience that's using this muscle that has never existed before.
It seems to me too that like we have a tendency if you come from the game industry, to contextualize everything around like the professional processes of game studio creation. But if we look at Minecraft, it's the highest selling per unit quote unquote game of all time. Of course, it's much more than a game, it's a whole creative platform. The vast majority of things that people do in Minecraft isn't like making a Minecraft server to earn money from people that are going to then play on your server. And it seems to me like this area of creativity, it actually opens up a whole new universe where I don't even have to think of it as a professional activity in the same way that when I shoot videos on my phone, I'm not like, oh, am I going to be able to monetize this video that I'm shooting? No, it's for my personal expression and my personal creativity. Just a thought, does anyone see that happening here with something as complicated as 3D? Yeah.
Just one analog of that. I think I heard this. I think it's pretty accurate, but like more than 80% of images that are being generating with text to image are actually for image therapy, which it was very surprising for me actually.
The Midjourney case,
yeah. So it's like people paying for like just because they are trying to explore some concepts. So I think we shouldn't underestimate this population. I think this is the user base that is going to drive GenAI products.
All right, well, we've been talking a lot about like the creative aspect of 3D, but there's a whole other domain which is like visualizing 3D, and Nima, that's sort of where your company comes in. I'd love you to talk a little bit more about what you do. Afterwards, people should take a look at your device. I don't know if you brought it. I assume you did. But.
I have it on stage with me, actually, yeah. So what we do at Leia is we create 3D hardware, which allows you to visualize things in 3D without the need for glasses. And when I say 3D, I mean true stereoscopic 3D. When you're looking out at us right now, you're seeing the world in 3D, but all of our existing displays have been 2D. VR and AR headsets are also great. We love those. Our media files can run on those. But what if you didn't have to put a headset on? What if you could just look at your existing displays, existing laptop, existing tablet, existing phone, and just see things in pure stereoscopic 3D without the need for any additional eyewear, and be able to share that with other people, show them what you're creating? We have been doing that for about 10 years. We've been building the hardware, and about maybe a few years after I joined, so maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, we kind of realized that one of the big problems is there's just not enough content. There wasn't really generative AI at the time, right? So you couldn't just create content out of thin air. People had to go through a laborious process to create it. So now what our AI is able to do is upgrade existing media from 2D to 3D. And I think that that's kind of one of the incredible things that you'll see with a lot of different AI pipelines, is that you'll create something, move it to a different pipeline, elevate it, view it, share it, et cetera. And I think that one of the cool things about our tech is that it doesn't really compete with any of the existing technologies. We're able to elevate everyone's technology. If you do anything in photos or videos, you can elevate it into stereoscopic 3D, and then you can take that stereoscopic 3D and use the depth maps to create true geometry 3D. And then you can also display all of this on display. So if you already have geometry 3D, you can view it in the most natural way without the need to put on a headset. And I think that's kind of making things more accessible, elevating existing media, and having this kind of like a missing link, like a bridge between traditional devices and futuristic devices is really critical, and is going to help grow the ecosystem a lot.
Well, I was just also thinking that I think for a lot of us, this idea of having a more 3D world, especially in content we consume on a regular basis, even in like marketing and retail, feels a little foreign right now. But we're also making advances in other technologies to make this more scalable. So the idea of the 3D internet and how we're going to need content for this to exist. And there's definitely skeptics out there about this idea of the 3D internet, but there are advances being made, like just as much as there are in generative AI. That I have personally witnessed that I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be so cool to make not just like kind of games, but new interactive games that are linked websites that will be super like PlayStation on a web page, and what those experiences will be like. And people will definitely want to participate in the creation of that new internet.
So as I tee up the next question, by the way, we'll probably have time for one or two questions. So think about what you might want to ask this panel. We've got people who are real experts in 3D graphics and the intersection with generative AI technology. We've talked a lot about games. We touched on a few interesting things right there, Tejas, with the idea of like art therapy as being one of the applications of Midjourney. It all seems like there's a lot of like these playful applications around it. Sometimes it's a game, sometimes it's just sort of play for play's sake, but there's an enormous amount of use cases. Another one that just comes to mind is just like education in general, like the ability to enter 3D spaces, but to then be able to prepare a 3D space for someone to convey information spatially. Like, you know, that might be an example of something that is really difficult to scale up because you can't afford to have like a game studio make a 3D space, spend millions of dollars inventing it, when it might be actually at the level, again, of sort of like with the Minecraft example, it might be the teacher in the class who needs to make it for 10 people or 20 people. Until we get to the point of immediacy there, you can't really unlock all these really interesting use cases, the so-called metaverse, as it was being called for a while. But Marguerite, you seem to want to add to
one
that.
of our clients comes from a no-code education platform called ThingLink, and with it they have various ways in which to support the teacher and the student relationship to explore various subjects. Well, one of the things that I think is really neat and that I've been learning is this idea of the creative flow. So there's things that happen in game development when you get a user into the flow state. What's happening is they're creating dopamine and they're learning better in this state. So the strategy, while they're having fun, they're also learning and becoming like reinforcing the type of player they are. So what happens in education and creativity, if you get your students into a flow state with creativity alongside a subject maybe they don't love as much, something really hard in chemistry, and you're doing immersive storytelling and they're creating scenes and they're placing objects and they're using other parts of their brain, that dopamine actually reinforces their ability to comprehend what they're learning. So I think that's really interesting in ways that teachers can leverage these new educational tools that are cheap. It's really inexpensive for them to have these sort of applications as opposed to like something clunky and the students have to figure out how to learn it. It's more intuitive to them.
Just a quick note on that. Is this on? Okay.
Yeah.
That one. Quick note on that. There's lots of research that shows people learn a lot better. The learning and retention is much higher in 3D. So just to add to your point.
Nima.
Yeah, that was actually exactly what I was going to say. You should look into the research. It's really incredible to see how much higher the retention is of knowledge. But that can also be applied not just in education, but in almost every single setting, whether it's corporate training, whether it's advertisement. We're seeing a lot more. You can easily look at a clear causal link between having like 3D objects you can interact with on a web page and people's purchasing intent. It increases. So when it comes to how is this used for business, it's not just because everything looks prettier. It's not just because 3D gives you more flexibility with how you can interact with things. It actually does change consumer, student, and customer behavior. So I think it's incredibly critical to look at this going forward.
One direct example of what you were talking about is I have a 3-year-old daughter, and she spends like 2-3 hours every day watching Little Angel and Cocomelon and a bunch of these 3D. I mean, she's spending like 2-3 hours every day watching 3D stuff. And I think one of the main motivations for me to build some of the tools is like, I just want to be able to create like Cocomelon blended with some other concept, teaching her some other concept, right? I think that would be incredible. So most of our little humans are spending their time being entertained and being educated by 3D content. So I think, and they're learning a lot actually. Some of the base layer of human civilization almost is through that information channel. So I think there's a massive opportunity there.
Well, I think it's like half our brain, right? Half our brain evolved to deal with spatial information, so it makes sense. Do we have any questions from the audience on 3D and where we're going with this? Okay, it's a tricky subject. Here's one of the questions I have then, which is, we talked about the technology sort of maturing to the point of like AAA quality, but is the workflow around this really going to be at something where people are going to be able to use it on a day-to-day basis? Like, that's what makes Midjourney easy. I can just go to Midjourney and I get an immediate result, and I can cut and paste, and it's in my PowerPoint deck or whatever I wanted to do with that. Like, are we still going to be struggling with the million different pieces that make up a 3D pipeline? I know, John, that's sort of like where you've focused a lot of your work.
Yeah, that's all changing. 9 out of 10 major tech companies are already making 3D objects in native format. So you're getting native support. You're getting easier and easier ways to connect them together. Generative AI is putting these pieces together, doing the difficult part to solve the pieces. And within the next couple of years, we talked about, production or creating as therapy and all this, but as AI and the technology just puts all that together for you, and it's supported everywhere, it's used everywhere. And I want to make a huge note on this is that technology is always trying to make things more natural. Yes, we get more powerful, but then we create interfaces that make things more natural. 2D is not a natural way to live our lives. 3D is. So that's what's so huge about this. Yeah, we're getting better learning. We're getting better, sales of objects and everything. It's because it's the natural way our brains interact. You talk about a big part of our brain. That's the entire back of our brain is the occipital lobe, specializing in this. So, I can go on for hours, and I'm not going to. It's just that's a critical thing here. Is this is the natural way. And technology is enabling us to be able to leverage this like it's never before been possible.
And I think that there's definitely both the layers you could look at is how do you make it super accessible to lots and lots of people and make it possible for anyone to create. But I think that it's also equally important to look at how AI is helping people that are at the top level of their game. For example, one of our technologies is the ability to do 2D to 3D conversion of content, and you can either do it real time or you can spend more time and get an even higher quality result out of it. And what you're seeing here is we're seeing a lot of inbounds from the top media companies in the world, the massive IP holders, the sports networks, and the sports casters that work with the stadiums. And what they're able to do is run through our software, and instead of what you normally do when you're converting a movie to 3D for theaters, is you have someone who's going and painstakingly rotoscoping every single character there. They are looking at how to do optical flow to see how objects are moving on the screen, using that for the estimation. But what you're able to do with AI is you get 80% of the work is done. You just run it through the machine and you get back a perfect quality depth map. And I shouldn't say perfect quality, very, very good quality depth map. And all you have to do now is just go clean up the rest. So I think the ability to just have even experts in fields be benefited with technology like this means that we're just going to be getting higher quality content across the board. It's not just more content being created by new people who couldn't create anymore, but it's also that the people who are the best at this are going to be able to churn out way, way more and do things faster, which reduces costs, which if the labor costs go down, hopefully the cost to consumers will go down too. So I think overall it's really incredible to see how much professionals who are at the top of their game are benefited by this too.
I mean, it's not unlike what we've seen in other disruptive fields. Like, you could say the same thing even of something like YouTube, but it simultaneously opened up a new distribution channel where everybody could put up content, and they had never created video before. But of course, people that already knew how to create video were also able to do really high quality content and kind of cut out the middleman from the process of creation.
Well, I was going to say, it also means you can redirect your funds and resources to these other areas that are more exciting, that usually get the short end of the stick. Like understanding in game development where the fun is as fast as possible, and then able to build that out further, give it more focus. Because right now it's pretty painful to also create an early game and get it to a user and them to see it for what it's supposed to be without all the art and the visuals and the experience. They always see just a rudimentary game as just being a crappy game, no matter how fun the little stick drawings might be.
I mean, in game development, so much effort is put into creating what's called a vertical slice. So a vertical slice is basically when you convince a AAA game publisher to give you $1 million or maybe a few $1 million to show like one level capturing like, here's the true essence of this game and the fun factor, but also the aesthetic, the experiential aspect of it. Because it's really hard in games to like model out all of the experiential qualities. Like there are things like paper prototypes, and you can play with that, but it doesn't really capture the fun, the true experience of the game until it's on the screen and you can interact with it. So short-circuiting that could potentially radically accelerate just the velocity of development, the point in time from idea to it's on the screen. Because believe me, anyway, how many people are game developers in this room, by the way? Okay, so kind of a small percentage. Ask them about it. Ask them if their idea was amazingly fun the first time they translated the idea to the screen. Usually it takes a lot of iterations, so speeding that up is how you actually make great products. Cool. Well, we're just at time, so I want to thank all my panelists here. This was a really fun conversation, and like I said earlier, this is an event where there really are founders and creators, builders here, so use the opportunity to network with everybody, talk to some of these folks when you have the chance to outside of the content hall here. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everyone.